Jared, are you speaking in tongues? Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to elevate your thinking. It's time to elevate your faith. It's time to elevate my viewership. Like and subscribe. Oh God, this is the worst intro I've ever done. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jared, I'm an atheist, and this is Atheist Church Audit. And shocker, today I did something crazy. I did something totally unforeseen. I went to church.
That was unexpected.
However, today's church is not just a church, it is the biggest church in America? No. In the South? Wait, hold on. What's the biggest church in America? Huh, okay. Maybe it's not the largest in the world or in America, but it's pretty damn big. Today, I went to Elevation Church. And as you can see on this cutesy little brochure thing, I was their VIP. Me, specifically. They looked at everyone else in the congregation and said, screw you guys, Jared's here, roll out the red carpet. I'm kidding, that didn't happen, obviously. But if it did happen, that would be an even bigger red flag than anything else I'm about to talk about today. So I don't even know where to begin with this one. Elevation Church in the South is both famous and infamous, depending on who you ask.
Elevation Church is led by false teacher Stephen Furtick and his pastor wife, Holly Furtick.
For a while there, they were considered the multi-campus satellite evangelical church, at least in my perception of things. I'm pretty sure their base of operations is in Charlotte, and then they have, I want to say 19 satellite campuses. Now, if you're new here, or if you're an ortho bro, I will explain what this means. So satellite campuses, they do it differently at different churches, but here, what that means is you have a dude preaching in a different city, and they literally Zoom call him in. So I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about that in a minute. So yeah, Elevation Church is famous and very infamous, depending on who you ask. The church is often criticized as being an aberration of, standard evangelical Christianity. But by and large, this church is really disliked by people who are very well read in theology. It's not disliked by all Christians, but it is disliked by the majority of Christians that I would run around with. I don't know that I've ever had a professor or a pastor or a Christian teacher who would look at this place and be like, 2 thumbs up. It's kind of like talking to an artisan barista about Starbucks coffee. They get red in the face talking about, how little care and preparation there is. So that's the context that I have in the background going into this church. And as per usual with going to a new church, I like not doing research beforehand. I don't like coming in with preconceived notions. I don't like coming in knowing about their, CSA case in the back of my mind. There isn't one here that I'm aware of, thankfully. But I just want to go and experience it as people experience it. Because truthfully, that's what's happening 99% of the time, is that people just come and experience it. And for some people, they have a wonderful time and it's really persuasive. And I want to know what that feels like for them. So I pull up for their 11:30 a.m. service. This satellite campus, to my surprise, is actually not a dedicated Elevation building. They share a campus, or rather rent their space for this campus from a Christian high school. Or maybe it's a K through 12 school, I don't know. So I park my car, walk up to their visitor booth, tent thing, whatever, and I met with several smiling faces who hand me visitors cards. We're so glad you're here. Scan this QR code. Welcome, you're a VIP. Oh, hold on, let me get my t-shirt. Are you a leaky faucet? Because you got some sweet drip, bro. I am unironically going to wear that shirt. Scratch that. I'm going to very ironically wear that shirt. So there is a cynic in me that, could tear this to shreds, but generally speaking, I like being met with nice, smiling, warm faces. Even if they've been coached through how to do it, it is still a nice gesture and I appreciate it. The other thing is they immediately, asked me to get plugged into an e-group. They have, it's 2004 and they have E before everything. The eBay era prior to the I era, right? You remember that? Anyway, so it would be super easy for me to come here and do fan service to both my atheist audience and my Christian audience and just blast this place to smithereens. But that feels too easy and it feels a little too on the nose. And I want to be careful that I'm always giving churches and more importantly people their due diligence, because there's more than 10,000 people who go to this place and they love it, and they're not stupid people. They come here for a reason, and I want to better understand that reason. So me and my buddy Jeff go inside, we find our way into an auditorium, and they have repurposed the basketball court into a satellite campus for this church. Now, truthfully, I have to pause here and say that this is really a technological marvel. The way that they've been able to orchestrate this entire thing is really impressive. So they do this twice every Sunday, once at 9:30, once at 11:30. You walk in, you take your seat, there's a countdown timer, because of course there is, and then praise and worship starts. Now, praise and worship is a live band that is there at this location. And they have it kind of like perfectly queued up that they end exactly in time for the main service to be ported in from the main campus. So you're standing there, you're clapping your hands, you're singing your songs, and the worship leaders here are kind of the same copy-paste Hillsong worship experience that you would find at most modern megachurches these days. They're all stupid talented, they're all stupid pretty, and it's a pleasant concert-going experience. And when I say concert-going, I don't mean that in the meme sense. I mean, it's a concert. They had earplugs by the door, which I'm not gonna lie, is appreciated. I mean, it's like, it's so silly and it's so dumb, but at the same time, it's sort of like a modern convenience that I'm actually like grateful for. Because yeah, I do like the bass pump in my chest when I'm listening to music. And yeah, sometimes it does hurt my little ear holes and I want to, be able to stuff some cotton in them. But it's just very silly. So I don't know if this is relevant or not, but when the service started, when the clock struck 11:30, there was only probably like 100 people in the room, maybe 75. And I was like, oh my God, is this place like dying off? What's going on? But then after the worship stopped, and by the time Pastor Stephen Furtick, we'll get to him in a sec, by the time he started preaching, there was close to 500-600 people in that room. They got some tardy Christians at this church.
Look at that, you are late.
So the live and in-person praise team finishes their last song, and then the screen turns on and it transitions to a virtual concert. And again, gotta praise them for like how much of a technological innovation this is. It just feels so seamless. It doesn't feel like, oh, we're here listening to live music and then we're turning the TV on and watching some people, somewhere else. It just feels like it's all happening there. So then you're clapping your hands along to a virtual worship song that's happening in Charlotte or wherever. And then Pastor Stephen Furtick himself comes along. And zoo-wee mama, what a handsome man. Now, if there's one main takeaway from this entire video, it is this. Stephen Furtick is yoked. The whole time I was listening to his sermon, the only thought running through my mind was, God, I want to hit the gym. His biceps looked like pigs in a blanket poking out from that cute little sleeve. And I mean, not to brag, I'm a little bit of a gym rat myself. I can do a total of 3 push-ups now. But God, I would need to be shoveling trenbolone sandwiches for like years before I looked anything like him. My dude must be subscribed to Jeff Nippard. Don't subscribe to me, everyone. Go watch Jeff Nippard. Now, if you're new to the channel, and I will assume you are, I want to talk about the metric that I use to determine whether or not I like a church. And take this with a grain of salt, understandably, because you, dear viewer, are probably a Christian and I am an atheist. Your job is not to please me. Your job is not to get the atheist stamp of approval. Acknowledge God in all of your ways and He will make your paths straight. But that being said, when I go to a church, I'm looking for 3 things. I'm looking to see whether or not these churches line up with mainstream Christian doctrine, whether they affirm the Trinity, whether they believe in a physical resurrection, what they say about church history, yada, yada, yada. And I'm not totally unqualified to comment on that. I'm an idiot, but I've got 2 degrees in theology. Next would be whether or not I think they align with the historical Jesus message. If you're a Christian, you think that those, the first and second thing, are the same thing, but I would respectfully disagree. And third, and probably most important for the sake of this video series, is I'm trying to figure out whether or not this is good for people. Now, obviously there's a bajillion caveats there, but that's kind of the framework, generally speaking, that I'm working with. So regarding the first point, I know that a lot of evangelicals really hate Elevation Church.
To deny that Stephen Furtick The head pastor of one of the biggest churches in America has some questionable doctrine, doesn't seem to have any elders to hold him accountable, has never taken ownership of some of the things he said, is spiritual gaslighting.
We're going to talk about Stephen Furtick, and we're going to look at 6 things that he believes and teaches that should cause you to run in the opposite direction. And trust me, it's going to get a little scary.
And I was here today trying to listen with an open mind, and I was trying to put my, imaginary evangelical glasses on and try to see it from their perspective. And I'm not gonna lie, this was interesting because I had to really squint to see why an evangelical would have a problem with this church. Now, granted, I was here for one service, and it's unfair to judge the doctrines and dogmas of a church or the beliefs of a pastor based on one service. He's not just gonna sit there and read off all 1,100 pages of his systematic theology. But that being said, if you transplanted his sermon and put it on the lips of John Piper or John MacArthur or Dr. Michael Brown, who is one of my professors, I don't think that the general Christian world would have a problem with this sermon. It was very biblically dense. It was all about the woman at the well in John chapter 4. He was cross-referencing the book of Galatians and the Psalms, and the entire sermon that he preached is one that I've heard in other Christian circles. So my hunch is that evangelicals would have to really squint to try to find why something about this service or any service is heretical or unorthodox. But here's kind of my working theory. It's not per se that anything about elevation is strictly speaking heretical. They're saying all the right things that are in alignment with standard Christian doctrine, but it feels like the emphasis is off place. There was mention in the service about Jesus dying and rising for our sins. There was mention about heaven. There was mention about, I don't know, the Bible being the Word of God. But then the emphasis of the service is that God is going to do something in your life. And from the worship songs to the sermon, it was very focused on what can God do in your life. You need to have faith and trust and believe in God because He's going to work a miracle for you. He's going to do something with your family. He's going to have a breakthrough in your finances. But even then, this doesn't feel like it's the worst of the worst as far as like self-help churches. I've seen some churches, mostly online, never in person, where the emphasis is so far removed from, giving God glory that it's just like, this is strictly a self-help book. And this didn't feel like it was that bad. It wasn't like way off into the weeds of self-help Christianity, but there was a tinge of it. So on that front, kind of mixed, right? But the thing that I'm most interested in is whether or not this is good for people. And obviously, I'm totally underqualified to make any sort of assessment like that after only being here for one meeting. But I want to kind of separate this out for a sec. So, as a, person who's interested in theology, I'm interested where this congregation lands on the theological spectrum. But then, as a atheist and a person who likes humans, I don't really give a crap what people believe. Not in the grand scheme of things. I just want to make sure that people are well, that they're not being manipulated or taken advantage of. I know that some Christians historically have labeled or defined cult as anything that is, aberrant from Christian doctrine, and that's dumb. I really don't like that definition. You can call a group heretical, that's fine, but that's very different than being taken advantage of and pimped or manipulated or financially extorted. So first and foremost, I want to make sure that everyone is on a same level playing field of, hey, we treat our parishioners right, nobody's being taken advantage of. And then from there, if you want to bicker about doctrine and theological points and, the minutia of the Bible, be my guest. Now, on that front, I should start off by saying I came in this with a little bit of a bias that actually worked in favor of this church. I got curious this morning, and so I was reading the Wikipedia entry on Robert Tilton.
We've seen many, many children healed. We've seen midgets grow.
Now, even when I was a believer, I was very, gracious towards a lot of the big mega preachers. I wasn't even ready to full send a condemnation against like Kenneth Copeland.
I blow the wind of God.
But the one preacher that I hated, that I prayed that God would send to hell, was Robert Tilton.
It's burning on the inside of you, and you need to make a vow of faith of $1,000. Oh, Bob, couldn't you say 25? No!
This bastard was a grifter of all grifters. According to the Wikipedia entry, the conservative estimate was that he spent 67% of his televangelism time on air fundraising. And he would beg and plead for money from his parishioners that were often in the thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. And he would often bribe people by saying that he would pay for their prayers if they sent in, X amount of money or whatever. His staff was told to take those envelopes, take the money out of the envelopes, and then shred or throw away any prayer requests that was in them. And to me, that is the most damnable thing that I have ever heard from a televangelist.
I laid on top of those prayer requests so much that the chemicals actually got into my bloodstream.
I know for a fact that he did not pray over them, and that I took them to the trash myself.
Also, for what it's worth, Robert Tilton is still on the air. He is 78, I think, and still asking for money on the internet.
So that's why we call it a miracle toolbox. This will release miracles, finances,
got powerful
health.
oil in it. Right here, it's got the oil. It's got the handkerchief with your signature on it.
And it's got my
your
miracle pen.
So I think I had that guy in the back of my head as I was visiting this church today. And it's like, compared to Robert Tilton, I mean, Lord, Stephen Furtick is basically the second Messiah. But no, I mean, everything is a spectrum, and my first glance at this was, well, he's not the worst of the worst. Now, to be clear, Stephen Furtick is very wealthy. He is a multimillionaire who lives in a multi-million-dollar property, but as far as I know, he hasn't used that level of slimy tactics to get his money. It's mostly from book sales, which it's a different debate for another day, which I'm not going to criticize him for in this video. So regarding the whole satellite campus structure of this shindig, I also criticize this at Summit Church. This entire shindig is built on one dude who is fallible, one dude who is just as likely to slip up and stumble and cheat on his wife or embezzle church funds as anyone else. And if this dude slips and falls, he's not just taking one congregation with him, he's taking 12 congregations with him. Now, Summit Church is led by the former president of the Southern Baptist Convention, J.D. Greer. And it's a very similar ordeal where it's one dude who's being ported into, a dozen other congregations, and he's on screen, and that's church. And when I audited Summit Church, my biggest criticism was, well, this is unhealthy because you have one pastor in charge of thousands of people across multiple congregations, and if that pastor slips up and falls, he's taking 12 congregations with him instead of just one. And I think that criticism holds here, but the thing that makes this place a little bit different, a little bit worse or scarier, is Stephen Furtick himself.
Why is the only time that we thank God for our health when we need to be healed?
Now, for what it's worth, I blasted Summit Church for their organizational structure. I hate satellite campus churches. But my biggest criticism was the structure itself. J.D. Greer, I thought, was fine. The thing that felt off about Elevation Church is that Stephen Furtick is probably the best preacher I've ever seen.
If I sow this unkind word, what will I reap in this relationship later?
Now, this will sound like a compliment, but it's actually a little bit more of a sideways criticism. It was a little unnerving how good of a preacher Stephen is. The thing that makes me nervous about all of this isn't that he's, wildly off base biblically, or that he has a harem of virgins who fan him in white dresses, but it's that he's perfected the Tony Robbins charisma effect to an uncanny level. I've just got to say this. He is the most charismatic preacher I've ever seen. When he got out on stage, he had this interesting back and forth with the worship leader there, and he was trying to drum up this little diddly that he had in his mind, and he was trying to coach them through it.
Like the chorus, faster, pass it through. The other chorus, like this, 2, 3, 4. For the ways he made, for the price he paid, for the love that is, all the praise. That's it. For the ways he made, for the price he paid. All right, that's it. I just want to get on tape.
And I don't really know what to make of this interaction. If I was to be cynical, it almost felt like there was a little bit of a power play, oh, I'm not only the pastor, but I'm able to be the worship leader. Check this out. But the thing that was unsettling to me was that during his sermon, he had some gutsy moves. he walked off the platform, he walked off stage and started walking around the aisles, gently touching people on the shoulders. And he'd be raising his fist and yelling, and this man just exudes confidence. He exudes charisma. And he's walking around the aisles and he's touching people and he's looking them in the eye and he's like, God did that for you, brother. God did that for you, sis. And even watching it through the screen, it's easy to get caught up in it. Like you feel that little bit of excitement, like, oh, is he going to look at me? Is he going to call on me? Is he going to brush my arm? It's like that verse in the book of Acts where, Peter is walking around and people were like putting their dead people outside or their sick people, hoping that maybe even his shadow would cast upon them. And so he's walking through these aisles and he's raising his voice and you just hear his inflections and he's nailing it and nailing it and nailing it. And he's got these verses memorized and he's, hey, pull up Galatians 3:14. And it was a really impactful sermon. You felt it in your soul. And I'm still processing. I'm still conflicted. Something felt off. And I don't know what that is. And I don't even know if it's fair of me to say that, right? If he wasn't saying anything bad, if he wasn't hurting people, what's the harm? So take all of this with a grain of salt, as I hope you always do, because I'm an idiot. I think it just scared me seeing how much sway he had over the people. Now, being charismatic and being likable and being talented in preaching does not make you a grifter. It doesn't make you bad. But somehow, in some weird way, it felt like playing with fire. And I don't know if that's fair. I don't know if that's uncalled for. But something I heard him say at the beginning of the service was,
the very clear thing that I heard God saying to me today to preach to you was, he will help you in the hard place.
And I'm not against Christians saying that they've heard the voice of God or feeling like God spoke something to them, but there's something unnerving about the definitiveness of that. God told me to say this. It's a trump card that you can't question. And again, as far as I could tell, everything here was okay, at least on first glance, but I think it's that in conjunction with how charismatic he is that feels like it's dangerous. This is a shitty comparison to make, and if you're a Elevation Church goer, I apologize in advance. I've done a lot of reading on Jim Jones. I am utterly fascinated and utterly horrified by him. And for most of his ministry, he was a good man. He was an ardent proponent of desegregation. He fought tooth and nail for the black community. He was able to preach across racial lines, and bet your ass he was the most charismatic, persuasive preacher you've ever met. And everyone wanted to be liked by him. And I, as an atheist sitting in the pews at a different congregation than the one he was actually preaching at, felt that urge, that desire. I hope he likes me. I hope I can get his attention. I hope he walks by me. And what the hell is that? What is that magnetic personality? And why am I skeptical of it? So this criticism feels like really unfair because I don't want it to feel like, oh man, you should be punished or treated with skepticism if you're a talented preacher, if you're a good orator. But maybe it just makes me nervous when it feels like the atmosphere in the room is such that you could ask these people to do anything and they would bend over backwards to make it happen. Now again, maybe this is totally unfair. Maybe this is totally unwarranted. Here's an invitation though. If you are a member or a former member of Elevation Church, tell me in the comments whether I'm off base or not. I genuinely want to hear your stories. So a thing that Christians will like and a thing that Christians will hate. There was a point at the beginning of the service where the worship leader said, and can we speak something good into existence today, this morning, church? And one, I think that is just laughably unbiblical. And two, I think it's bad for people. And generally speaking, like it's mixed. I don't know. I don't know what the psychological literature says on that. Like there's got to be a balance between speaking positivity and speaking well of people and of things and of situations and being, generally optimistic versus being delusional and, putting off paying your bills because you're just speaking that they'll be paid. I would actually love to see some research into the pros and cons of that. But usually when I see secular people talk about manifesting stuff, I roll my eyes so hard that it's audible.
You see that? That's called manifesting to the universe.
So that was something that probably most Christians will not like. Something that they would like is that this campus pastor, the guy who doesn't preach, but the guy who is actually, caring for these people at this congregation, he got up there and asked if anyone wanted to, pray a prayer of salvation today. And And again, Orthodox theology, died on the cross for forgiveness of sins, yada yada. So one thing that was super cool was today I met up with one of my subscribers who's an ex-Mormon, and we visited this church together.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and I went to church with Jared.
So Jeff, my ex-Mormon friend, and I, afterwards we went to a New York deli and got a couple of hoagies. Hoagies, gyros, gyros, I don't know, it was food. We were talking and comparing notes, and it was fascinating getting to hear his perspective as someone who had a really bad time in Mormonism.
So I deconverted a few years back. This is the first time I went to any kind of religious service since then. I wanted to work through some of the religious trauma I have, so I was very, very oversensitive to anything that could be construed as a red flag.
Now, a lot of ex-Mormons and a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, when they leave, they get very interested in the bite model and, you know, learning all about cult behavior. And that is totally understandable because, especially for the Jehovah's Witnesses, the brainwashing is just so thorough and robust. It's really scary. So I think that a lot of ex-cult members get really into this sphere and they start reading about, you know, cult behavior, cult tactics, and then they start to see it in places where maybe it's a little bit of a stretch. And they start to genuinely wonder if other churches are at risk for being, you know, culty behavior. So my friend Jeff pointed to a lot of things that, you know, maybe on first glance could be construed as cult recruitment tactics, and I wasn't super convinced by them. For example, he pointed out that in one of the songs, there was a mantra that was repeated over and over again. It was like, Lord, you're worthy, Lord, you're worthy, Lord, you're worthy. I don't know, it sounds like poor lyric writing. He pointed out how that was similar to a children's Mormon song that tried to indoctrinate children into revering Joseph Smith as a prophet because they sang it over and over and over and over and over again.
Follow the prophet, follow the prophet, follow the prophet, don't go astray.
And I don't know. But so I think that there would be some people who would be really hasty to, you know, pull out their guns and say that, you know, something's amiss or something's awry here, or that this is a cult in the making. And I'm not ready to say that. All of this criticism might be totally invalid, and next week I might make a video recanting all of this. And I hope that I will, because I want these people to be well and thriving. And that gets me to what hopefully will be my last point, which is I don't know how to gauge whether or not this place will be good for people. It always bums me out that I don't have like statistical data to back this up. If there is statistical data on stuff like this, please leave it in the comments. I would love to research further. Churches like this love data. They love metrics. They love statistics. But the kind of statistics that I want are not how many people are in attendance. I want statistics on what is the murder rate of these people. How many people here are going to have their homes foreclosed on? How many people here are going to cheat on their wives? How many people here are going to deconvert in the next 5 years? Because my biggest temptation is to see this place as a stepping stone. Now, for some people, I think that this could be a stepping stone to more mainstream Christianity. You're fresh off the boat, totally new to Christianity, never heard of it before. You walk in here and you're like, oh, well, this is fun, this is interesting. You get really into theology and you're like, well, this was a fun learning experience, but I'm going to go to a PCA church that is more, you know, theologically rich. I'm sure that that has definitely happened in the past. My hunch is that for a lot more people who come here will have already been kind of lukewarm Christians, and this will be the last stop before they get off the bus. And I'm not even entirely sure why I think that. It could just be because you have the option of getting lost here. You know, even though they really are trying to push people towards these e-groups and blah, blah, blah. I think for the average parishioner, they're able to walk into the service 30 minutes late and they don't really know anybody, and, you know, they shake a couple of hands while they're there and it's a nice experience, but they're not constantly interacting with a pastor. They're not going to confession with a priest. It's kind of a cool song and dance that they get to do once a week, and then, you know, if they were to drop it from their lives, it wouldn't be life or death for them. So all in all, I'm kind of conflicted on this church. I'm torn with the whole thing. And at the end of the day, I want these people to be well. And I think for a lot of them, they would say, yes, this place has benefited my life. And I hope that they will continue to say that in the long run. My hunch is that if this church were to stay exactly as it is from now into perpetuity, then I think it would be fine. But the fact that people get older, and the fact that people change, and the fact that all of this is seated on the shoulders of one guy really scares me. And I feel shitty saying that because, like, if you're a member of Elevation Church, I don't want to put that in the back of your brain like a doomsday scenario. Pray for your leaders, man, but also have the courage to say something if you feel like something's out of line. So yeah, I'm sorry that this wasn't the epic, 1-2 takedown that you were hoping for, but I'm more interested in wrestling than I am with knockouts. Again, please litter this comment section with your Elevation Church stories. That wraps up another Atheist Church Audit. My name is Jared, I'm an atheist. Go to church. And now that we've gotten this bullshit out of the way, I'm gonna go make a steak, because I'm hungry. I just wanna sink my teeth into some succulent red meat and go Thank you, goodbye. Holy crap, you made it till the end of the video. Hi, how's it going? I'm currently in the middle of investigating like 4 or 5 different cults, and this whole thing is crowdfunded. If you want to help me pay for gas money so that I can continue to go and visit weird churches, consider sliding over to my Patreon page. I've got a lot of behind the scenes videos, I've got a book that you can download, I've got some really explicit pictures of my So, all that being said, thanks for being here.